Oh, absolutely. And I think we're going to start seeing more of these stories. I really do, because I think people are understanding more. And I also want to make the point and re-emphasize the point. This is a generational thing. People in the younger generation who got diagnosed when they were kids and got proper support and are much more open about telling a partner, hey, I'm on the autism spectrum, or hey, I have Asperger's, whatever. Then you have a basis for working with it together and for making better decisions as you go along. Okay. So younger people are handling this very differently. My book is really talking about a specific generational divide from the age of about 50 onward, where sadly, those kids were not diagnosed as kids.
Welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's the author podcast where you get to meet amazing people from around the world. I love this show because I get to meet some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I'm excited to have Eleanor on the show today. She's got many books and many new things coming down the road, so there's a lot to talk about. Her most recent book, which we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about today, is Disconnected, Portrait of a Neurodiverse Marriage. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. I've never had anybody on to talk about this from this point of view, but Eleanor Vincent's on the show. Eleanor, welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dave. I'm really excited to be here.
This is good. Excellent. Eleanor, I know the answer to this question, but my audience doesn't know. Where are you in this big world of ours?
I am in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, about 30 miles inland due east from San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So for people who aren't familiar, that means I'm in the hot country in the summertime and in the colder country in the wintertime, because things reverse in the wintertime. So we get fog in the winter. In the summers, it's blazing hot out here. And in between, it's absolutely beautiful. Spring and fall are incredible where I live.
Nice. And is that where you're born and raised?
No.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh.
I spent a good part of my childhood in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. So very familiar with the lake effect snows and snow days as a child. And I only arrived in California when I was just about to turn 30. But I've been here ever since. So at this point, I consider myself a Californian.
That's one thing I notice when I travel in the U.S. and I talk to people. I'll meet people, like I've been to Phoenix, Arizona a few times for work, and I meet somebody. I'm like, so are you from Phoenix? And almost everybody would say, no, I'm from New York. I'm from Boston.
Right.
Everybody seems to be from somewhere else. I'm like, where are the people that are from here? Like, where are those people? So that's pretty interesting.
They're there.
Yeah.
And likely in Arizona or New Mexico, many of them will have some kind of Mexican or native heritage, the people who have deep roots there, or their families were big landowners back in the day when things were switching over from Mexico to the United States. And the same is often true in California, although I do find in the Bay Area more people who were born and raised here. It's surprising, but there is a huge contingent of Midwesterners here, like me, who have been here for many, many years, whose children were born here, who have, been part of the community here for many decades. And I think you will find most of those people do consider themselves Californians at this point.
Right. Yeah. I think home is where you land, right?
Correct.
Home is where you land. I love it. Okay. So Eleanor, we have authors listening to the show. They come here for inspiration. They're looking for time with somebody like you. My listener, as an author, they're just starting their journey. They're brand new to this path. And here you are with multiple books, many new things in the future as well. You know something that somebody listening could really benefit from. So if you could kind of, in your mind, go back to some of your earlier days, and now with the hindsight of thinking of what you know now, what would have been helpful to hear for you as a young author when you first started out, that for you right now, you've kind of seen the results from these things?
I think the number one thing is a kind of determination that it's hard to even put a label on. In order to do sustained creative work in our particular culture, in our particular time, you need to be very determined. And that means you need to be in it for the long haul. And when I was a younger writer, I was passionate about writing, but I don't think I understood what that was going to feel like over the arc of a very long career. I don't think and there's no way you could understand what challenges were going to face you. You didn't know, like when I was starting out in the early 1970s as a newspaper reporter, and that was plenty challenging, but little could I imagine that, 30 years down the line, there would be social media, there would be the internet, there would be all these different ways now of, bringing your work in front of the public in ways that we couldn't possibly have imagined.
Right. Yeah. It's a totally different world.
Exactly. And you have to be, as a writer, I feel, both flexible and incredibly dedicated to the work, to stay with it over a long period of time. And honestly, it's my feeling that it's only over the long haul that you're going to see the results of what you have attempted to do. And I think it can be very discouraging for people facing rejection. Rejection has been a problem for me, which is why I preferred jobs that involved ongoing structure and support, like newspaper reporting, where I wasn't having to sell a story day after day as a freelance writer. I was just showing up to work, putting my butt in the chair and writing a couple of stories by 10:30 in the morning because I worked for an afternoon newspaper. Okay.
Sure.
And that experience, as I look back on it, when I was in my, early to late 20s, was so formative because I learned the discipline of sitting down day after day after day and producing copy, producing writing that made sense for an audience, and understood that that could be done in a couple of hours if you put your mind to it.
Well,
yeah. And that has formed the basis of the career that I've had since. And there was, of course, no way I could know as a young reporter that that was going to be the case. I just knew I loved writing and I loved connecting with an audience.
so that's a good discipline to grow up and kind of as a writer under having
Right.
that deadline, having to write succinctly, having to tell a story in a small amount of time. You don't have 30,000 words. You have to be I like the time thing. Like
Right.
it has to be ready because the newspaper is being printed. So
Correct.
where's the story? Let's go. Right.
Right, exactly. And the other factor for me that I realize now how important it was, you're, at least at that point in time, which was in the mid 1970s, you're in a newsroom with, in my case, it was a smaller newspaper, but a very well-regarded one, the Worthington Daily Globe in Worthington, Minnesota. You're in a newsroom with 12 other people, and they're all doing the same thing, and they're all under the same deadline, and they're all on the phone trying to get information from their sources, and they're all clacking away on their keys. And that kind of what I now call body doubling or co-working was so important, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time. There is something about working with other writers that I've tried to replicate in my working life now by going to co-working spaces where other writers are that is so important. And if I had any piece of advice for younger writers, it's find your community. Find the other writers who are working in your genre. Find the people who are really dedicated to their work, and then hang out with them. Go to their readings, buy their books, or read their articles. If you can physically sit down and work with them, you're going to get so much more done.
Yeah, it's that intrinsic motivation to write, and then the extrinsic, when people are out there around you modeling it, and you're looking around like, okay, well, everyone here is writing except for me. I should probably start writing and then you kind of that group thing happens, right?
Yeah,
And
there's a
everybody
group
works together.
energy.
Yeah.
There's a hive energy. That's what we call it, a hive energy. You're like worker bees, okay?
Yeah.
And surrounded by your other worker bees, you're going to feel more supported. Writing is lonely work. It really is. And so finding your community, I think, is so important.
That's a great starting point for an author. I think that's awesome. Anything beyond the deadlines and how you learned to write when you were younger that you still use today from those days?
Yeah. I mean, I think to write creatively, which is different from writing as a journalist, you have to love to read. You have to love literature. And I was so fortunate as a child because I grew up in an environment where both my parents were readers. We had books everywhere. Both my parents were in theater, so there was a ton of interesting people around and opportunities to be surrounded by people who were practitioners of the arts and to understand that that is a possibility, which is, I don't think a lot of people aren't exposed to it early in life. And I was from my earliest days. And my mother in particular used to read to us every single night, even though once we got old enough to read to ourselves, she kept going.
Right.
And so we were exposed to absolutely beautiful literature early in life, and that had such a deep impact on me. So
Wow.
I want to acknowledge those opportunities that I was given. In some ways, it was a very privileged environment. Emotionally, and what was going on in my parents' marriage is a different story. But from the perspective of creating an environment where you're going to raise artists and people who are sensitive and empathetic, my mom in particular did an amazing job.
It's amazing to know that that's kind of been a source for you, right? In the moment,
Oh,
you're like, I just love reading, but then it's like, oh, it just develops, it grows, it gets bigger as you
oh
go
yeah.
along, right?
And as an 8 and 9 year old, I was
Yeah.
under the covers with a flashlight at night, reading Nancy Drew mysteries and the Bobbsey
Yeah.
twins and the Black Stallion books.
Yeah.
Even after my mother had finished reading to us, we were supposed to be sleeping, and I had my little flashlight, and I'd get under the covers there and read away because not only was it engaging and inspiring, it was my way of coping with an emotional environment that was very unstable. I could count on stories. I
Mm.
could count on characters,
Right.
you know? And I think from a very early age, I understood that writing and reading could be a form of healing, a form of escape, a form of inspiration. And I've absolutely carried that through all the way.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I'm talking about now 70 years,
Wow.
because I'm talking about when I was a 7 or 8 year old. So,
Yeah.
it's a long time. 7 decades is a long time.
Wow.
So,
It's amazing. That's great. That's a perfect start. I'm thankful I asked the question because I knew you'd have some great advice for our author listeners that are listening. So let's switch over to the readers because that's the other group of people that's here with us as well.
yes.
I'm on your website. I love your website, by the way. We'll have a link for everybody in the podcast so they can go right to it. Beyond the book we're going to talk about and focus on today, Disconnected, there's a lot more for readers as well. Could you kind of give us like an overview of some of the other
Sure.
works that we're going to see on your website, just so they can fall in love with that as well? And we're going to spend the bulk of our time on Disconnected.
Yeah. So, I really love the genre of memoir. I love taking the raw material of some very difficult situations in my life and transforming it into a story that's going to captivate a reader and that's going to provide them with perhaps some clues about how they might face a similar situation, or if they have a friend in that situation, how they might help that friend. There's always an underlying, I like to say there's my social worker side comes through in my memoirs. I really, really want to help people. That's a huge motivation for me. I don't, as I'm creating a story, and I do create stories in a memoir, and I think that's something we could maybe spend some time on, how one structures a memoir, because it is not just a recounting of your life.
Right.
It needs to be transformed into a page-turning story. And that is some very difficult but satisfying work that needs to happen. So I wrote my first memoir when I began it shortly after my older daughter was killed in a horse riding accident in 1992. I was in a creative writing program. I went back at mid-career to get a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing because I knew that was my path going forward. And when I was in the first semester of that program, my older daughter, Maya, who was 19 at the time, was bucked off a horse and sustained an absolutely devastating brain injury and died 4 days later. I, at that point, was working on a novel. I was obviously devastated. I had to set that aside, and I immediately started writing about Maya. And I will often say, if I had been a dancer, I would have danced it. If I was, an artist, I would have painted it. I happen to be a writer with the skills by that point, because I was in my mid 40s, with the skills, the ambition, the wherewithal to write about it. And so that's what I set out to do. 10 years later, I had a finished book. And of course, there was a lot of things that happened in between there. I'm not saying it necessarily takes 10 years to write a good memoir. What I am saying is, in my case, I had so much work to do, to grieve, to raise my surviving child, Megan, to continue my career, which at that point had shifted into a corporate career where I was doing writing and editing for large corporations, because I lived in the Bay Area, which is very expensive, and I needed money to raise my children, send them to school, buy them shoes, etc. So it took as long as it took. And I'm actually grateful for the time, because I think it made it a much better book. And I learned so much in the process of writing Swimming with Maya. And I was incredibly fortunate, because the first publisher went out of business after 6 years, and I found another publisher for that book, and that is highly unusual. So it was republished in 2013 as an ebook and a paperback. And at that point, the internet had become very much a thing, and writers had to be online, marketing online. In my case, largely through reader newsletters like BookBub and others. And the small publishing house that had republished the book, the guy who owned it, Mike O'Mary, was very good at online marketing. And so that book took on a whole new life and has since then sold more than 20,000 copies, which is just extraordinary.
Wow.
For a small press book.
Yeah.
So that's the history of Swimming with Maya. Honestly, I'm so proud of that book. I think my writing has evolved since that time. And I could feel that as I was working on Disconnected, that I'm just a more experienced writer now. I know more, and therefore I can do better. And so in Swimming with Maya, you're getting a really heartfelt story. You're also getting a story that was incredibly carefully structured. So it is a page turner. I know that because people tell me. In Disconnected, you're getting a book by a much more mature writer where there's a lot more compression and therefore more tension in the work. And so people tell me Disconnected, they can't put it down. They read it in one night. They stay up all night, because there's a momentum to the story that I successfully did in Swimming with Maya in sections, but in Disconnected, it's just like boom, boom, boom.
Wow.
So that's the evolution. And then the other things you'll see on my website are pieces I've published in literary magazines or anthologies. One I'm particularly proud of is a piece I wrote about the fact that my daughter became an organ donor at the time of her death. And I published a piece about it in a creative nonfiction book of true stories about how people die. And because people don't really understand brain death unless they've actually had a loved one who's experienced it, I felt like I wanted to explain that in a deeper way. So that's a long form essay that was published in a book, which is a collection of other essays, which I highly recommend.
Yeah.
If you go to my website, you can get a link to that.
Nice.
Because thinking about and talking about end-of-life issues and how we grieve and how we go on after a loved one dies is so important. And in the years since that essay was published in 2012, I've seen a huge evolution where now I think people are a lot more open to this than they used to be. So that's very gratifying.
It's amazing how writing your story can help in your grief as well as you kind of work through this. Had you not been a writer, would you have any other outlet for that grief?
Well, I think, as I explained, because of my childhood, I was always going to be in some form of the arts.
Yeah.
And writing is not the only thing I do.
Okay.
I do collage, I dance, I've been in choirs, I sing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm kind of like all art all the time if I
Yeah.
could be. I
Yeah.
can't be because I have had to live a life in the real world and be practical about some of my choices. But I would have found a way to express it.
Yeah.
And, really, I often tell people, and I do want to caution people, writing is not the primary way I processed my grief. You have to do your grief work.
Right.
I was working with a therapist for 12 years after my daughter died.
Hmm.
I was doing spiritual work. I was practicing yoga. I was taking long walks. I was talking to dear friends and loved ones about what had happened. I couldn't, there's no way I would have been able to process it strictly through the writing. The writing was definitely an important piece of it. And the other thing I want to say is it's not enough to just put your grief on the page. There has to be craft. You have to be able to shape it into a story that another person can enter into.
Right.
So to think of memoir simply as an exercise in some kind of emotional healing, to me, is not the way to think about it. It is an art. And you're taking the raw material, which might include grief, or it might include, as in the case of disconnected, heartbreak in a relationship that just didn't work out. It might include a lot of things, but those things have to be transformed and processed by the writer before the writer can write a story that a reader is really going to be able to relate to.
So parents that have lost a child, anyone that's experienced any kind of significant trauma through death, this would be a great companion book for them to kind of have with them on their journey. And right.
Absolutely, because the last third of that book shows how you can recover. It shows one family's journey, and my journey in particular, to recover from a blow that I thought was literally going to kill me. I didn't think I was going to make it. And if you talk to any bereaved parents, and I've talked to a lot of them over the years, that is a common thread.
Right.
Nobody gets through this without having feelings of, I just want to be where my child is. It wasn't that I wanted to harm myself in any way. I certainly didn't want to abandon my surviving child, but I so wanted to be where Maya was, especially in the first 2 to 3 years afterwards. It was a struggle. So what I'm trying to do is show that over the arc of the recovery, amazing things can happen. And because we had the opportunity to donate her organs and tissues, that added a layer of both complexity and of real support to the recovery, because we got to know a couple of the people who received her organs. And that was so inspiring. So in Swimming with Maya, I really tell the full story from start to finish, and what was the outcome for those people and those families who received the gift of life from my daughter, how that impacted them.
Wow.
So I think it is a story that stands up over time. It's a very inspiring story, and it is really written with the intention to help people.
That's why I'm glad I asked, because when I'm going through your website, I'm like, there is a lot here for readers. And that is such an important story. I know we're here to talk about Disconnected, but I really wanted to honor that story as well. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Maya is an ongoing presence and an ongoing inspiration in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I somehow found the way to write that book, because it's extremely meaningful to me to have
Right.
that book as a tangible evidence that my daughter walked this earth and did amazing things and was amazingly gifted. And then through the manner in which she died, was able to help so many other people.
So now I want to connect the audience and readers to Disconnected. See how I did that? There we go. Because this is what we're focused on today. And this is a unique angle that I have never had on this show. I have talked to authors who have written about neurodiversity and autism and several different things from different perspectives, from parents to children, children to parents, but not within a relationship, not within a marital relationship. This is something I feel like I'm going into uncharted territory myself as we go through this conversation. But let's talk, if you could talk to the listener, your ideal reader for this, who's going to connect with this book. If I could just get out of the way for a second, that person, Explain to them what this book is, the intent behind it, your love letter to that reader who's going to be reading Disconnected. Can you talk to them for a second about this book?
Yeah, I think there are layers of the ideal reader for this book. I think this book can help anyone in a relationship, but it is particularly geared toward people in relationships, largely women. There are some men, but it's largely women with undiagnosed autistic partners who do not realize the source of the conflict in their marriage, don't understand it, and find it not only confusing and confounding, but profoundly alienating. Because an allistic person, that's somebody with a neurotypical brain, and an autistic person or a person with Asperger's, those two people are speaking different languages because their brains are wired differently. But if the autistic person was not diagnosed as a child and never acknowledged or was acknowledged as a person with that particular brain wiring or neurotype, as we call it, they don't really understand how to have a relationship with somebody whose brain is wired completely differently. And the holistic person doesn't understand either. So I think the person who wrote the foreword to the book, who's a wonderful therapist, Sarah Swenson, who specializes in working with neurodiverse couples, recently published a Substack post, the title of which truly captures this. It's called The Relationship Where Everyone is Trying So Hard and No One Feels Safe. So if I had to give a headline for what my book is about, Sarah's recent Substack post really captures it. And I urge people who may be in these relationships or wondering if they're in such a relationship to immediately go to Sarah Swenson's Substack and look this up, or to go to my Substack, because I have published a series of posts about aspects of autism in relationships. Thank heavens this is now being talked about more, but we're still in the early stages of awareness about this, which is why, Dave, it's so important what you're doing in having this conversation with me today.
Right.
People honestly do not understand, and I did not understand. On the day I said I do to my husband, I had no concept of what I was actually signing up for. I knew he was quirky. I knew he was super intelligent. I suspected Asperger's, but I had a Psychology Today understanding of what Asperger's was.
Right.
I thought it was difficulty with eye contact, social awkwardness, sort of more of an introverted personality style. I did not have any conception of all the myriad other things that can go along with it, especially if the person has a lifetime of masking their autistic symptoms in order to get through the world, and then brings that masking into the relationship. And there are some people now, again, I'm so thankful to these people who are autism and Asperger's specialists, who are specifically talking about the lost generation.
Yeah.
People over the age of 50 who were never diagnosed as children, who have gone through life masking in order to survive, and then are in relationships and forming families with people who don't understand why they're having so much conflict in their relationship.
Right.
And often it's only discovered when the children of those relationships are diagnosed with autism or Asperger's. Mm-hmm. Then the spouse might go, oh, wait a second, this is genetic. Maybe we should be looking at the family history and the people involved in this relationship to understand the challenges that the children are facing. And as the children get support, then hopefully the neurotypical spouse or the holistic spouse can start getting support for herself or himself. Because I can't even imagine what it would be like to be trying to support neurodivergent children and have a neurodivergent spouse.
Right.
In my case, I was so much older, I just had to face the challenges of dealing with a spouse that I really couldn't reliably communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to reach those people who find themselves in that kind of a situation. But as I say, we all mask. We all
Right.
mask, especially in the early phases of a relationship.
Oh,
So
yeah.
a lot of what I'm sort of dramatizing in Disconnected, I think could be beneficial to anyone,
Okay.
but with a special emphasis on families who are dealing with neurodiversity.
Okay. Can you give us like an example of something early in the marriage where it started to, pieces started to fall into place where you're like, okay, there's something happening here and I need to know more, going beyond the initial meeting and getting to know your husband. But
Right.
then things are starting to demonstrate themselves to you. You're like, wait a
Right.
minute. Can you give us an example of what that felt like or was like in the moment?
Well, in our case, it was particularly dramatic because we got married in September of 2019. 4 months later, 5 months later, we were in COVID lockdown.
Right.
So my husband's and my own coping skills were very challenged by the fact that now he wasn't going away every day to a job where he was getting a lot of satisfaction and support for his skills because he was a database genius. Instead, he was locked down with me, and I was, of course, feeling anxious as we all were at the beginning of COVID. What is this? Are we going to die? What's happening? We were in the high risk group because we were over 60 and we lived in a community with other people in that age group. So we were very, very careful. We didn't want to ever bring any kind of infection to our neighbors. And so the early months of that were really scary. And when anybody's under stress, but particularly when a neurodivergent person gets under stress, they can no longer mask successfully. And so, as the mask dropped and as conflict became a daily occurrence over relatively simple things from how full to fill the electric tea kettle to how to load the dishwasher to much bigger things like, well, how are we going to cope with our budget? Because my husband ultimately got laid off his job, and that then layered financial stress on top of everything. And so what I saw is that as we tried to talk about some of these more difficult emotional and financial aspects, he would shut down. And by shut down, I mean completely shut down. He would stop speaking. And depending on the nature of the conflict or the discussion, some of them I thought were just normal discussions that any married couple would have, but he would interpret them as attacks on him. And he would literally disappear, sometimes without any notice to me. I had no idea where he was. He would just be gone. And I would have to be texting, hey, let me know where you are. What's happening? Or not speak to me literally for days. I would sit across the dinner table from him, cook a meal, set it down, try to engage in conversation. Nothing. It was as if I didn't exist, as if I wasn't there.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. It was intense. And of course, our sex life fell off a cliff,
Yep.
which I was very unhappy about. And in the beginning, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I did what I think a number of people might have done in my situation. I tried to talk about it and got nowhere. And then I would, sort of escalate and start begging and start crying. I stopped that behavior after about 6 months because I saw that it accomplished nothing. So it was deeply upsetting and very isolating because of COVID being the additional stressor.
Right.
And not being able to have people in our home. All the things that were happening in the relationship were going on behind closed doors. And as I tried to express my distress, first of all to my friends and then to therapists, I didn't get very far because people couldn't see what was happening. And the comment I would sometimes get from friends is, oh, all men are like that. They are emotionally, they don't have any emotional intelligence. They're all that way. And I'm going, no, this is not like anything I've ever experienced before.
Right.
And so it was so distressing that I immediately started reading, trying to find resources, but still not understanding the nature of the relationship completely, I turned to resources I had used in the past, which is conventional marital therapy. We went through 3 rounds of that.
Mm.
It would help for a couple of days, and then everything would spiral again.
Right.
So in the end, it just became so expensive and so frustrating. And I finally realized, after talking to people who specialize in working with neurodiverse couples and working with autistic individuals, normal therapy is not going to help you. In fact, it may make things worse.
Mm-hmm.
You need to work with somebody who specifically understands the two separate brains that are confronting each other without understanding what's really happening. And that's why Sarah's piece is so helpful, because she's calling that out. The relationship where everyone is trying and no one feels safe. I have no doubt my husband, especially in the beginning, was trying very hard, but he was misinterpreting my language, and I was misinterpreting his language.
Right.
And we were swirling around in conflict that never got resolved.
Yeah.
And ultimately just drove a wedge between us.
Yeah, I'm just picturing two people from two different parts of the world who don't speak the same language, put together in one place, sequestered, no outside help, and then trying to live together, communicate together, and they're just not. Language-wise, they're not connecting. Personally, they're not connecting. They're just in the same room, but they're disconnected. There's no connection between the two of them.
Right. And honestly, it went from bad to worse. There was a period of time there where we were sort of like friendly roommates.
Right.
There was no real intimacy, but we were living together, and we had this house that we both really enjoyed, and we were, working on it, and we were seeing friends, but there was no real depth to the relationship. Literally, he was like my roommate. And then over time, as I learned more and as I tried to get us hooked up with resources that actually could help us, by that time, he was feeling so alienated that he ultimately opted out. And he even said to me in an email, when I had gone away for an extended period because I was losing my mind, he wrote me a series of emails. And in one of them, he said, I acknowledge I've opted out of our relationship. I'm not participating. And I thought, well, okay. And then I wrote him back and said, well, are you willing to work with an autism coach, the two of us together? And he ultimately said no. And that was when I realized I can't do this alone. I cannot carry the weight of this relationship and keep trying to make it work. If he's not able or willing to participate in saving the marriage, what am I doing? And that's the point at which I asked for a separation.
So what's that time frame then, from 2019 to that point?
To 2023.
Wow.
We lived together for a period of a bit over a year, and then got married. So the total time frame is around 5 years. The marriage lasted 3 years and 9 months. And,
Wow.
Honestly, I still participate lightly in listservs, support for women who are going through this. And I feel so fortunate that I had the emotional, social, psychological, and financial resources to get out, because a lot of people do not. They have children, they're dependent on their husband's income, they're isolated. There can be a lot of different factors, but I hear the cries for help of women who have been in these relationships for 20, 30 years until they realized.
Wow. Wow.
And then what do I do now that I know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel, and this may sound weird, but I feel extremely fortunate that I had the ability to find the resources, to find the books, to find the support groups, to find the people to help me understand that what I was trying to deal with was so far beyond anything that I could cope with as an individual, that the only sane and kind thing to do was to get out.
So, yeah. And then write a book that people can then use and reference, learn from your story, and
Right.
maybe give them some perspective, I would be curious if Disconnected showed up in your home in 2019, early in this, if a book like this showed up for you, how your life and path would have been different.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a good question. I wrote the book that I needed.
Right.
I was able to find books by therapists that were extremely helpful to me, and I mention them both on my Substack, in posts I put up on my website, and in the back of my book. Maxine Aston, a British psychotherapist, being foremost among them. Her books are particularly helpful, and they made me understand, oh, this is the pattern. It's not about you. Because in the beginning, I was thinking, what's wrong? Why has my husband fallen out of love with me? What did I do? And I was taking it very personally. And I quickly realized, oh no, don't take it personally. This is the pattern. This is what happens. And so those books were extremely helpful, but they weren't telling me the story from the point of view of the woman in the relationship. And I realized that, well, that's the book I have to write. I have to tell the story of what this is like, what it feels like, what it looks like, what happens, and how you cope. And a lot of the things I did, I'm not saying that's the best way to handle it. I mean, I did some things that I wish I had known better. If I'd known better, I would have done better. But I had my own meltdowns in the relationship where I just got so frustrated. I just started yelling. Not a great approach with somebody who has autism and who has sensory sensitivities and who feels very threatened, right? I tried my best whenever we needed to have a serious conversation, not to have direct eye contact, to suggest that we go for a walk. So we were standing side by side, moving through the world together, and he wasn't feeling confronted. Right. I learned, and I practiced those techniques, and I learned a lot more techniques by working with an autism coach, which I did for almost a year toward the end of the marriage, to modify my own behavior and my own communication. Sadly, by that time, it was too late.
So the person.
So I don't know if my book would have saved my marriage. I'm not claiming this book is going to save your marriage. I will make the claim that it's going to help you have compassion for yourself and your spouse, because I'm really trying to show what therapists call the double empathy problem, where, again, both people are trying very hard. There's this communication misfire. Both people feel in some way misunderstood or disengaged or disrespected. It's happening to both of you. And in my book, I'm trying to paint that picture, right? This is not one person's doing. There are two people in the relationship. Yeah. And tragically, it's called the tragic dance of the neurodiverse couple. Wow. Because they don't understand what's driving their conflict and they don't know what to do about it. They take it very personally and they misinterpret the signals that they're getting from the other person. And that's why Sarah says, where everyone is trying so hard, but no one feels safe. The autistic partner doesn't feel safe. The allistic partner doesn't feel safe. And it is tragic. I loved my husband deeply. I wanted this to work and I believed it could work. Otherwise, obviously, I wouldn't have married him. And what we did was an act of courage, but it was an uninformed one, because we didn't understand what we were really dealing with.
Wow, this is powerful. Like I said, I have never had anybody on this show to talk from this point of reference and this lens. And that speaks highly to the need for this book. Right. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're going to start seeing more of these stories. Mm-hmm. I really do, because I think people are understanding more. And I also want to make the point and reemphasize the point. This is a generational thing. Right. People in the younger generation who got diagnosed when they were kids and got proper support and are much more open about telling a partner, hey, I'm on the autism spectrum, or hey, I have Asperger's, whatever. Yeah. Then you have a basis for working with it together and for making better decisions as you go along. Right. Okay. So younger people are handling this very differently. Yeah. So my book is really talking about a specific generational divide from the age of about 50 onward, where sadly, those kids were not diagnosed as kids.
And their family members also today get better training and better help to
Oh,
learn how to work with someone in your family that is on the spectrum. So then we have the skills and the tools, right? So
right,
like you're talking about in your relationship, you didn't have the skills. You didn't know what you didn't know. So
right,
you're doing things, you're getting loud, you're raising your voice, and that's having the reverse impact for him, right?
correct,
So we don't know, right? Because we weren't raised with that knowledge as well
right,
to help and be an aid instead of a detriment, I guess, in
right,
some situations, right?
right. And understanding, again, I'm going to reference my Substack called Writing the Real World, where I do a series of essays on aspects of autism in relationships, the aspects that I was completely unaware of. Things like alexithymia, which means no words for feelings. My husband literally could not put words to his own feelings, nor could he understand what I was trying to explain to him about what I was feeling because he had alexithymia.
Mm-hmm.
Pervasive or pathological demand avoidance, which autism activists have relanguaged as persistent demand for autonomy, which is an extreme form of anxiety which causes the person to resist any attempt at cooperation, no matter how small. And you can imagine trying to go through a marriage with someone who has pathological demand avoidance. And it goes on. There are depression, anxiety. There are so many associated conditions that go along with high masking autism that I had no idea about. So I'm trying to raise awareness on my Substack, not just through my book, so that people can look at a shorter article about 900 words and go, oh, I didn't know about this. And then I give you links to where you can go and learn more about it.
Wow.
I think it's really vital. And for parents who are trying to deal with children who have pathological demand avoidance, understanding the huge level of anxiety underneath it can help maintain some balance and some level of sanity with the child who is refusing to cooperate with you and who may be doing things like biting, kicking, screaming. You know, it's my hat goes off to anybody who is raising a neurodivergent child or who is in a relationship with a neurodivergent person, because it takes a tremendous amount of patience, courage, compassion, and self-compassion, because there will be times, even parents will confess this, where you're going to lose it. And you have to be able to turn around and try to repair if you've caused further harm that you didn't mean to cause, but also to assess your own need for support and compassion. We need people who can step in, just as if you're taking care of an elderly loved one.
Right.
People need respite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And the people who have the courage to deal with this well, my hat's off to them.
Eleanor, I think we could talk about this all day because it keeps expanding. It's like, well, what about this? What about that?
Right.
Like, and that's why we need the book. Like, right. That's the reason why the book is here. So that's
Correct.
going to help a lot. But I think for the listeners, especially if people are resonating with what we're talking about, following you along on your Substack would be great starting point. Connecting with you through your website would also be a great starting point for somebody, right?
Absolutely.
Buying the book, obviously, is why we're here. But there's other connection points for people as well to get more information in addition to the book. Right. And you said the links are there to help support
Correct.
that as well.
I have on my website, if you sign up for my newsletter, you will get a list, a clickable list, a digital list that you can click and go to certain websites. In my book, I have a list of other books and articles because you can't, in a book, make it live, right? You can't click on it. So both are available. And I want to just put in a small plug. The ebook of Disconnected is currently on discount at $2.99.
Wow.
And if people are interested in a download to their e-reader, I encourage them to go, because that's going to not be in existence come the end of February. Okay. So it's $2.99 for now. And if you're willing to do a review on Amazon and Goodreads, I would be so grateful. It can be very brief, but like all writers, we got to juice the algorithm or the
Right.
book doesn't get noticed. So reviews are absolutely vital. And I say thanks in advance to anybody who's willing to do that.
Yeah, we encourage that on this show so much because you provide us your words as a writer, as an author. We, as readers, can give our words back in return. Not just give like, great book, great author. That's fine. But we could do a little bit more because a great, well-worded review also helps the algorithm because we're
Oh,
pulling out things from the book that resonated with us.
absolutely. And
Right?
I don't mean to be impersonal. Let me just be
Yeah,
very
yeah.
clear. It helps me as an
Yes.
author when I hear from people how I have assisted them
Right.
to greater understanding or to a breakthrough in their relationship or to some kind of way of coping with their situation. It's super helpful. It's not just about the algorithms. Writers need to hear from their readers.
Right.
We need to be connected, and that's why what you're doing is so wonderful.
Eleanor, talk about your website before we go. We'll have a link in the podcast so people listening can just click right on their phone and come right to you. But for those listening elsewhere, talk about your website and then as well your Substack before we head out.
Okay, so the website is just eleanorvincent.com, and the Substack is eleanorvincent.substack.com.
Okay.
So just with my name, you'll be able to connect in that way. And I welcome that. I love for people to comment on my Substack posts or to go to my website. I have a huge archive stretching back to the early 2000s of posts and essays on there, starting with Swimming with Maya and working my way all the way up to the current time with Disconnected. So
Wow.
there's a treasure trove of information on the website for those who want to, search on a topic or whatever. You can find that.
Eleanor, first of all, thank you for sharing your story with Maya. I think that's like a completely different conversation, but it's amazing that that was your starting point to get in there and leverage writing in that time for you and your family. I can't imagine losing my child in that way or any way. So to be able to put that on paper, I think that's very helpful for parents and for people who have suffered that kind of loss. So thank you, first of all, for that part of the conversation, but for Disconnected as well. I think this book can help a lot of people.
I
And
sure
it
hope
could
so.
open their eyes, maybe open their heart, give them some of the tools they need.
Mhm.
And maybe it doesn't end up in, a separation or this kind of thing happening. Maybe it could help. It could help, especially if you go
Correct.
get the right help from the right people.
Absolutely. And I will help you connect to the right people with the right expertise, which I desperately wish I had known about
Right.
back in 2020, but I didn't. So now I do.
Yeah.
And I want to share that with everyone.
Yeah. Not only now, we know because of
Yes,
Disconnected. So there we go.
correct.
I love it. Eleanor, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for sharing your words with us and your time. I think this is a book that we need right now. So it's so great to have you on the show, and I'm glad that we can have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dave. I've really enjoyed it. It's
Excellent.
been very illuminating to me because you've asked me some questions and caused me to think about some things in some ways that I might not have put into words before. So
There we
thank you
go.
for that.
Beautiful. Everyone, all information is always in the show notes. Definitely go over to Eleanor's website, grab a copy of the book wherever you buy your book, and wherever you buy it, leave a review so that everybody knows. And as you're listening to this, you know somebody else. As you listen, you're like, oh, I know someone else who needs this book. So don't buy one, buy two, buy three, so that you could send them off to them as well and tell them about Eleanor and all the great things she has for readers and resources as well. Eleanor, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks again, Dave.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.